What's up, guys? Before we get started here, I just want to point everyone in the direction of the KRW network. On that channel, we're going to be talking about literally anything, not just Saw content, American Horror Story, and everything else that I cover on this channel, but literally going through the gauntlet, doing lists, theories, speculations, pitches, and just everything else every Monday and Thursday, as well as other discussion videos and maybe more content as that channel grows. We're very excited for it, so I hope everybody will go and share their love and support. You can find the link in the description section below. Go subscribe and share that channel out because we're very excited for it. Anyway, with that being said, here's the video. What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about Spiral from the Book of Saw. We have a lot of stuff that's been kind of boiling over the last couple of days, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about all these updates. So with that just being said, let's jump right into this. So right off the bat, this is one that I really wanted to focus on because it's just kind of out of left field, but at the same time, kind of in the Saw wheelhouse, if you understand what I'm talking about. Obviously, I'm talking about the idea that when Spiral was in its kind of creative stages, the writers, Pete Goldfinger and Josh Stolberg, were thinking about maybe relating Chris Rock's character to Danny Glover's detective David Tapp from the first film. Now, when this did come up, Stolberg had to say, I think for a little while we played around with the idea that Chris Rock's character was related to that character in some way. You would be doing a great disservice to your career if you didn't think about that at least once while you're doing a reboot, or rather a continuation. But at the end of the day, it didn't pass the smell test. So, longtime fans of the franchise will know that this is not the first time that they were going to bring back Danny Glover in a Saw sequel, and it just didn't end up materializing. Obviously, there was some pretty heavy talks to bring him back for Saw 5, but ultimately, I think where his character would have gone ended up going to Detective Singh, making him a little bit more prominent in the backstory of all of this than he otherwise would have been, and then kind of jarring to the fact that he didn't show up in Saw 7. I've always been really weirded out about that, and if you're going to bring back a character that's kind of a legacy character but nobody really cares about but the fans, then just bring back Singh. I mean, obviously. But I guess the real point here is this didn't end up happening. And one of the things I want to hear from everybody in the comment section below is, should it have? I mean, for one, bringing back people, kind of connecting little tissue here and there with the Saw franchise is pretty much what this series is about for the hardcore fans. I understand that that's not what everybody wants from this franchise. In fact, the most people who watch it and what's made it such a successful brand is the fact that it's blood and guts and gore, and a lot of people consider it torture porn. But when it comes to continuations, continuing the entire film franchise from the first 8 films, or 7 if they don't really want to focus on Jigsaw all that much, despite the fact that we have the same writers and pretty much most of the same creative team, I'm wondering if it would have been interesting just to kind of, as Josh Stolberg says here, have Chris Rock's character related, at least in passing, to David Tapp's character from the very first film. If anything, I feel like that would hark back to the original film, making this more of a legacy sequel than anything else. And it would also give the fans something to kind of speculate about, like, how is this connected? What if they decide to reinvent the proceedings of the last couple of films and David Tapp survived because we never really saw him die. In fact, the only way that we know that he died is from the video games, and those can be considered canon or not canon, depending on how you look at it. So there's still a lot up in the air right now on that specific topic, and it's something that I feel a lot of people, such as myself, would want a little bit of answers to. I guess at the end of the day, I don't need this. I wouldn't need this connection in order for this film to feel like a relevant sequel. And I guess as like a fan, pretty much as big of a fan as you can get without being somebody who just completely fawns over this and falls over himself to reference it and just talk about it any chance he gets, that's as much as you want. And you know what? Just thinking about it in the sense that the video games would no longer be canon if they decided to go down this route. Like, there's no way that you could allow the events that happened in the video games and everything that transpired from the first and second video game from the entirety of the franchise to kind of interconnect and make sense anymore. As a fan, I really wouldn't like that. I understand the need and the want to have Danny Glover probably not come back. I mean, I feel like he's really aged out of that role. I mean, as opposed to almost everybody else in the films, I feel like he himself has aged out of that role, and you can't have a convincing portrayal of his character from where he was at the beginning of the first Saw film. But having his character come back in maybe flashbacks while alluding to characters in this film are related to him and that the events of the games either did or didn't transpire is a very risky situation for longtime fans. So I have to go ahead and agree with Josh Stolberg on this. I think they made the right call. It just doesn't pass the smell test in order to just make one passing reference to something that a lot of people probably forgot from the very first film, especially the general audience. They don't care about Tap. They don't even know who Tap is. You would have to tell them, hey, you know Danny Glover, do you remember him in the first Saw film? And a lot of people would be like, what? Are you sure he was in this first Saw film? Like, I kind of remember a couple things. Was that the one with the gas house? You know, that's the type of audience that this film is really trying to sell itself to. The general masses who do not pick apart the timeline and try to figure out everything. Next up on the list is whether or not Tobin Bell is ever going to reprise the role of John Jigsaw Kramer in any future sequels. I mean, at this point, we don't even know if he's going to be in Spiral, let alone Saw 10, Saw 11, Saw 12, whatever it might be. Speaking recently with comicbook.com, he had this to say. It's about the writing. If the writing is great, John Kramer is a King Lear-sized character. In my view, there's a huge range for him. He's interested in a multiplicity of things, from theology to philosophy to music to art, you name it. It all comes down to the writing. Actors are always looking for great scripts and great characters. I've had a wonderful opportunity of playing this guy in, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 films. Having an opportunity to develop him and to develop the people he cares about in those films, that's been great. I can't frankly prophesize about the future. You'll have to wait and see. Personally, I don't know where you go with this. I don't know exactly how it plays out with the future of the franchise. One of the things that we've talked about time and time again on this channel is just how old Tobin Bell is getting, despite the fact that his character died multiple films, like literally more than a decade ago on film, but even more than a decade prior to where modern time would be with any continuation of the story. Unless you do some kind of intraquel, which would take place between, Saw 2 and Saw 3, Saw 1 and Saw 2, or even somewhere in between all of the madness of all the other sequels. I don't know if this is something that they could possibly do. And you know what? I'm also one of the people who's been sitting here saying that I absolutely love his role in Jigsaw. In fact, I didn't think that he looked that much older or frailer or anything else. I mean, really, my God, I wish I was just as energetic and healthy looking as Tobin Bell when I'm his age, because the man still has energy, he still has spunk in his step. Honestly, he's just a really interesting person, and I would really like to meet him at some point in the near future. However, if the discussion is whether or not he should come back in any way, shape, or form for the future of the series, well, I've already done a whole lot of videos on this, which I will link in the description section below, so we do not have to go over them again. But the short version of that is, I think you have him come back for a season or two of a special television show in which you tell the story that you were going to tell, or maybe integral storyline flashbacks, bringing back Logan and Amanda and Hoffman and John and all these other people from the original franchise and put it in there so you can finish up the Jigsaw story in the television show going forward, and then do anthology-based sequels like Spiral going into the future that focuses more on John's legacy and his impact across the world, not just the United States, but all over the world, with people picking up his message and taking it in their own hands. And you know what? The reason I say it that way is because his character, the continuation, the continuity of the entire franchise, I think is the biggest selling point that it has, not only to fans like myself, but for people who haven't been born yet, for people who are just now growing up and will find Jigsaw in the cluster of iconic horror movie villains. They'll watch Jason and Michael and Chucky and Freddy and Pinhead and Leatherface and all of these before they get to Jigsaw, and then they will realize, hopefully, the compelling story surrounding this entire franchise. They won't live through this concept of this is just torture porn and you shouldn't think about it and all this other stuff that we had to live through while these movies were coming out. They don't have to deal with that type of perception in the same way that we did. They just watch them for what they are and realize that there's a lot more to this franchise than meets the eye, and a lot of it is because of Tobin Bell. And now with what we had from him, yes, Saw 3 is one of my favorite films. If they were going to end it there, it would have been a perfect franchise. It would have been a perfect horror movie trilogy. We got Saw 4, which builds his character. Saw 5 and 6 also build his character. Pretty much forgotten about in Saw 7. Jigsaw does kind of pick it up, but there's still a lot left on the table, especially with all they introduced. They need to give him some kind of conclusion, and that's the only reason I want him to go forward. In fact, I don't even really agree with him that it can be recast because continuity is so important in this franchise. And I would really like to get everyone's thoughts and opinions about that in the comment section below, because it's just something I'm very passionate about when it comes to this particular franchise. Next, we're jumping on Darren Lynn Bousman's appearance on the Boo Crew podcast over at Bloody Disgusting, in which he revealed that Spiral, even though it looks and feels like a Saw movie, is something completely different, especially with an additional added amount of humor because of Chris Rock. In that interview, he says, and I quote, "I can tell you that it feels like a Saw movie at times, and at other times, it's its own completely different thing. It furthers the Saw mythology, yet it takes it in a completely fresh direction. I'm really excited." He continued, "We did an early screening of Spiral when we thought it was coming out, and it was so awesome sitting in the theater because Chris Rock is hilarious as a person, obviously, but the movie is not a comedy. But there are a couple of really amazing, hilarious things that take place because it's Chris Rock. I'm sitting in the test screening audience. I've never heard people laugh at a Saw movie. It doesn't happen. And you hear this uproarious laughter and then this immediate silence because it turns so dim. The tone is so fresh and new and different, and Chris is just amazing in the movie." Okay, so this is something I want to point out here. Obviously, a lot of people don't laugh during the Saw franchise. They're not intended to laugh during the Saw franchise. If they ever do, it's kind of unintentional. Just off the top of my head, one of the things I could think about is the piranha scene from Saw 6. Like, that is funny, but it's unintentionally funny. But you also have things spattered out throughout the entire franchise. But the first film, in my first watching, people laugh. You know, the death scene that Adam takes down. Like, obviously, that's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be bad acting. The "I don't care if you cover yourself with peanut butter and have a 15-hooker gangbang." That's a funny line. There's a lot of really good moments in the very first film. And you know, I guess it's been so long, and you cannot fault these people for either forgetting about it or they weren't really there to begin with. The idea of how interesting or funny or some kind of aspect of one of the older films was when it first came out, right? If this film is funny, it won't be the only funny Saw film because we've had that before. We've had moments of humor spattered throughout the entire franchise. And I remember distinctly a lot of people laughing at various points and pieces throughout Saw 1 and probably, Saw 7, Saw 6. The piranha scene, the scene with Tobin Bell at the book signing during Saw 3D. Probably unintentionally so, but hilarious for everyone watching it at my theater back in 2010, because I definitely remember that one. Although, getting back to what they're saying about this specific film, does it expand the mythology? Does it feel like a Saw film? And is it going to give longtime fans something to get excited about? Every single one of these questions I cannot answer for you. In fact, I want everyone, like I keep saying, go down to the comment section below and share your thoughts and opinions, because what do you really want from a sequel to this franchise right now? I imagine a lot of people would come back with, oh, I would really like this, or I would really like that, if we could focus on this character or this point in the timeline or something like that. And I feel like a lot less people who would be listening to this video right now would be like, oh, I really want this type of trap or something like that. Most people who are excited about this franchise, who are excited about it more than or around a year out now that they pushed it back because of COVID, are excited because they want a return into this universe. They want to see how it progresses and how John's legacy has outlasted pretty much his entire life and the lives of so many other people that he's left in his wake. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this with the reintroduction of Tap's character and the idea that Chris Rock's character is related to him somehow. That might be stepping a little too far. Like Josh Stolberg said, it's not passing the smell test, but at the same time, you have a way of connecting the first film to the ninth film without having to go out of your way to do so, and you appease so many people like myself. Now, is that one of the laziest ways you can do it? Of course, I'm glad they didn't do it because of this specific reason, but are they going to forget the continuity as a whole? Are they going to forget the connective tissue that we demand in every single Saw sequel? I'm not entirely sure. Now, it's great to hear the director say that it feels like a Saw movie, but does that mean it's only some kind of a torture device, someone who's taking cues from John Kramer in some way, shape, or form? I'm not entirely sure. You know, I know that this is a continuation, it's not a reboot, it's set within the same world as the first 8 movies, and that's incredibly exciting. But there's still a lot of unknowns here. And I guess the only thing that we can be sure of is we could be happy that everybody is excited for it and that there has been some positive reactions to it going forward. Finally, I want to talk about Darren Lynn Bousman talking to comicbook.com about whether or not he's going to come back to direct any more Saw sequels after Spiral. In that interview, he said, and I quote, "A decade ago, I said I would never come back, and I think you could find maybe 6,500 interviews of me saying I'm done. So one thing I've taught myself is never say never because you might come back. So I will say this, there is something magical about the Saw universe, and there's something that is so undefinably special about Saw that I can't articulate it. Part of it has to do with the time and memory of when I was 24 years old, flying to Toronto for the first time on a flight, having no idea what the fuck I'm doing, and stepping off to meet Dan Hefner, who is the line producer and now producer of the Saw franchise, and meeting all of those people for the first time, and there's a boyish wonder of, oh dear God, when are they going to find out that I'm a fraud? But he continued, but now I'm 41 years old, stepping off that flight, being greeted by Dan Hefner, seeing those exact same people. Such a weird nostalgia that it's filled me full of this, again, childlike wonderment of holy shit, I'm back. So it becomes a drug. And I think if you had asked me 2 years ago, I'd say I'm never doing it. I would still say I'm never doing this Saw movie again. Now, if they call me back and say, hey, we're doing the next one, there's no telling. I'd probably be on the flight meeting Dan Hefner again. There's just something so magical about these movies. Now, just a couple things on this specific topic from me. Darren Lynn Bousman is the best person who has ever directed a Saw film. I'm not saying here, I want to make it very undeniably clear, I am not saying that he is a better director than James Wan. I'm not saying that he is as passionate as David Hackle or Kevin Greuter, or that he is as good as the Spierig brothers. I don't think he is. However, I feel like it's just unescapable how much impact he's had over the entire franchise over the last decade and a half. To make it inescapably clear what I mean here, go back and rewatch Jigsaw. Look at what they're doing with Spiral. They are desperately trying to emulate, and have been ever since he left the franchise after Saw 4, to recreate the style that he brought to the franchise around Saw 2, but primarily within Saw 3 and 4. You can argue that James Wan created the concept of the style because of necessity. You can argue that it was done better creatively with other films like Saw 5 or maybe even Saw 6. But regardless, it's never been done to the exact extent that Darren Lynn Bousman has been able to create. For me, it makes absolute perfect sense that they would not only want him back for this film, but they would want him back for future sequels if this one does well. They want him to shepherd this franchise into the future. So I know that this is just coming from somebody who's doing a podcast or an interview, but it makes sense that the producers and everyone involved, if this film is successful, they would want all this creative team back to follow up with Spiral 2 or whatever they decide to call it. What I'm saying here, though, definitively, is that I know Spiral wants to be its own thing, but right now, for me, it's starting to feel like they're trying to recreate this entire universe. They're trying to rebrand this thing that everyone already has an idea of what it is, and bringing back the best talent they have to do so. Kind of like what they did with the Transformers movies. Like, we want to start a universe. We want all of these movies to happen. Let's bring Michael Bay in to launch that. Or The Amazing Spider-Man was kind of lukewarm, but we want an entire universe. Let's bring back Mark Webb to follow up not only with a sequel to the film that he just created, but also a launching pad for everything that's going to happen after that. To me, it's kind of freaking crazy. We need new blood on this franchise, and we need a different perspective going forward. Granted, I have not seen Spiral. I don't know how much it comports with everything that we've seen from Bousman, not only from Saw 2, 3, and 4, but everything that he's done since then. Obviously, like he even says, he has grown as a creative individual. 24 to 41, that is a long time in comparison to creative artistic talent, and he went into Saw 2 kind of as a novice, as he said, like a fraud. So yeah, he did a fantastic job on that movie. He's had a long time to sit and vegetate on the concept of this movie in particular, and I imagine he brought his A game. With everyone else involved, there's just so much to lose for everyone that this movie, the more and more I think about it and the closer we get to it and the more it gets pushed away from us, you know, distance makes the heart grow fonder, guys. I am so freaking excited. But if they do a sequel, if they do something that isn't just Spiral 2, which I really hope they do, I want new blood. I want to see what other people do with this universe, and I want them to continue it in a very respectful way that doesn't have to become a yearly sequel-based franchise that picks up where everything else left off. This is their opportunity to really recreate the franchise, the legacy, and everything going forward. So, yeah, as much as I love him, I really don't want him to come back for another one. I thought it was a little bit of overkill bringing him back for Spiral when they could have gotten someone else to do it. But I understand getting the Spielberg brothers, despite their artistic talent, to come in and basically be guns for hire for Jigsaw wasn't really the best idea. Although I have argued, not only on this channel, but on Twitter before, that Josh Stolberg is really trying to up his creative game and do more directing, so maybe he's a good choice for the next one. Who knows? Given how interactive with the fans he is, and just how much he seems to really appreciate being a part of this franchise, I'd give it to him. Maybe throw some money and see what Lee Winnell can do if he really wants to get back in there, especially if Spiral is going to be just a jumping off point to an anthology series. Like, you can do whatever you want with the sequel, just do what you want and write it and do whatever. Like, that would be really interesting. Doing something that goes back to the heyday of the franchise is a good selling point, but it's not a way to really recreate the passion and the drive and anything going into the future. Like I said, Darren Lynn Bousman directed the best Saw movies, hands down, undeniable, can't argue with it. You might like other ones better, but what you remember, how you perceive, not just you, but the culture as a whole, how we perceive this franchise is all him. He did that. And I think he really has left his mark. But going back to that well one too many times can be detrimental. And I don't want them to overplay their hand with having him come back and shepherd whatever new franchise, universe, whatever content they're going to be creating after all of this film is said and done and we finally get to see it. So I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have enjoyed this. In fact, because of the length of this, I'm probably just going to make this a real talk. Probably not so much off the cuff. I will be editing it down so it's hopefully a lot easier to listen to than it otherwise would be, because I've been sitting here talking to myself in a room for about an hour now, and I just sound like a crazy person. But guys, I hope you have enjoyed this discussion. It's been a long time since we've been able to talk about the Saw franchise in general. No real news at this point, but, you know, now they're starting to promote it for some reason or another. And I guess because Chris Rock has Fargo on and he's really popular right now, so you want to get that out there, especially if you have more time to sell this film, which, you know, we're going to be talking about that at some point. They've only given us one trailer. I feel like they only really need to give us one trailer, but at the same time, they've had to push it back an entire year, and Lionsgate has always put itself on the back burner when it comes to selling any movies. They're pretty bad at it, so that's a whole other thing. Again, hope everyone's doing well, staying safe. Hope your family is safe, and, you know, you're not just in a desperate situation that 2020 has been this entire year. Anyway, it's been real.